years ago, the Polish government asked me, and I decided to speak about the next Copernican revolution. He informed us that maybe we are not at the center of the solar system or the universe, based on the data that he looked at. And the next Copernican revolution would be that we are not at the intellectual center of the universe. Now, why do I think that's very likely? Because, you look out and you see a lot of stars like the sun. You see 100 billion of them in the Milky Way galaxy alone. And we estimate that at least a few percent of them have a planet like the Earth, roughly at the same separation. So that means that there are billions of Earth-Sun analogs out there. So it's like looking at the street. You live in a house and you see a lot of houses just like yours. Now, many of my colleagues would say, okay, we see a lot of houses, but how do you know that they have residents or that they ever had residents? And I say that is the most natural assumption. When my daughters were young, they thought that they are the only ones in the world, like the world centers on them, simply because, it's just like LLMs, the AI systems that have a training data set. So my daughters had a very limited training data set, which is our home. And all the attention was on them. Obviously, they thought that they are the center of the universe. That's what humanity did as well, okay? Until Copernicus and Galileo Galilei argued otherwise. So at some point, my daughters looked through the window and saw other houses, but they never imagined that there are infants just like them over there until the first day in the kindergarten. And then they were shocked that not only there are others like them, but also they're not the smartest. And I think we haven't matured yet as a civilization. And I think the more natural thing to assume is, no, we are not special. There were things like us billions of years ago. The sun formed in the last 1/3 of cosmic history, and most stars formed billions of years before the sun. And there was plenty of time for those other civilizations to exceed our capabilities. In fact, there were 100 billion people on Earth so far. And you should ask, where is everybody? Well, the answer is most of them are dead. There are only 8 billion alive right now. And the same must be true for civilizations that existed. Most of them are dead. But what I'm trying to find is, if they left behind any relics. I'm doing sort of space archaeology. My search is similar to thinking that, you have a backyard, and very often you see rocks in the backyard, and some of the rocks come from the street. But every now and then you might find a tennis ball that was thrown by a neighbor. And I'm saying that's a very different approach than waiting for a phone call from a neighbor, which is pretty much what the SETI community, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, did over the past 75 years or so. They were just trying to wait for a radio signal. That's the idea of contact. And, that is very different than checking your mailbox for any package that may have arrived in the mail.
I think one of the things that really astounded me in your book was the comparison that you made was if you were to take someone from I sort of think in major epics of history. I think of like the several thousand years we know about before Jesus's time, right? Then right around zero, you know and then I think of like a slew of progress, innovation. I think of the Renaissance. I think of the Enlightenment. I think of the Industrial Revolution. I think of all these things that have, happened. And what you said is if you were to present an iPhone, to someone living in biblical times, let's
So
say,
a cave dweller, for example.
right, or even a cave dweller, it's almost like there wasn't the capacity for cognition, to be able to form, right, a story around what is this.
The cave dweller would say it's a rock of a type that I've never seen before. And that's what my colleagues are saying about interstellar objects. They say like Oumuamua, or now 3I Atlas, is an object of a type that I've never seen before. We can talk more about it. But my hope is if the cave dweller says that, there would be a kid of the cave dweller that would look at the rock and realize that they can press a button and something else will happen. And so that is the kid that will bring progress to humanity. And that's why, I think that science is really a great privilege to maintain your childhood curiosity. And my advice to young people is never behave as the adults in the room. I was traumatized at the dinner table as a kid when I would ask a difficult question and the adults in the room would give me an answer that didn't make sense, and they pretended to know more than they actually know. And becoming a scientist is really the privilege of asking questions. As science is, as I said today at CNN in the morning, I said that science, we shouldn't censor any question. Any question is legitimate within science. People think, oh, how dare you speak about this possibility? And I say, no, within science, you can ask any question you want. You can brainstorm whatever comes to your mind. The scientific method is all about getting data to answer the question. That's very different from politics, where you just need to convince other people to do something. That's very different from the discussions on social media, where you have to get likes. It's not about that. It's not about humans agreeing with you. It's about what describes the physical reality. And by getting enough data about reality, eventually we'll figure it out, just like a detective story. And, that's a lot of fun. That's fun. Science should not be boring. And really, the biggest problem with the way science is deliberated right now is that scientists have a press conference where they lecture to the public on what the public should understand. And they don't take any debates. They just tell the other side, the reporters, what they should know. But science is work in progress. There are always doubts, there are always uncertainties, and that's actually the fun part. And if science was portrayed as work in progress, and the scientists would not try to show off that they are smarter than the people they talk with, then science would be much more credible. Because a lot of the credibility went away, for example, during COVID-19. And when politics is introduced into science, that's pretty bad.
One of the things you talked about is the difference in capability that we might observe between us and a species, let's say, that has millions of years of a head start on us, billions of years of a head start on us. It's this. We spoke to Robin Hansen, and I was like, "This is nuts! Like, I can't even wrap my head around it." But what I was explaining to my teenager was that we are closer to the possibility of technological understanding and AI than, let's say, cave people were to an iPhone. However, there's still going to be this gap. So when you talk about a civilization that might have this kind of head start, because my brain can only do what it can, I'm thinking, oh, they must have had like a Jesus figure, and then they had, an enlightenment, and they had paintings, and then they had skyscrapers, and then they had terrorism. Like, I'm picturing our existence
Right.
a million years ago. But that's not necessarily what would have happened, because it's
No.
got its entire own time
Exactly.
course, like a whole bunch of other, like, I'm trying to literally
Yeah,
wrap my head around what that looks
exactly.
like.
So first of all, advice on a blind date. Don't express your opinion at first. Just observe. And so, when we deal with aliens, it's a blind date of astronomical proportions. And we should be open-minded to things we have never imagined, that not even Hollywood scripts have imagined. Because just like artificial intelligence, they were trained on data on Earth. All of the imaginations that we can find in the literature, in movies and so forth, they are based on experiences on Earth. And when you have a visitor from another star, all bets are off. Okay. Now, of course, in the small scale, you can imagine the way that the Iranian air defense responded to the B-2 bombers. They couldn't do much about it. So if they come to us and they have the technology that is a little bit above, then we won't be able to cope with it. But definitely, when you see airplanes, you know what you're dealing with. Here, it could be something that we cannot comprehend. So they could have the advantage of the amount of time that they develop science and technology, of course. But there is another difference that could be quite more important, and that is the size of the brain, or the capability, how many neural connections our brain has versus their brain has. Because it's possible that we are just limited by our brain, and the brain developed to the maximum size possible within the human body that consumes about 20 watts, by the way. If you compare it to AI systems that consume gigawatts, it's quite amazing what biology did. And I think at some point, we will have to visit the question, can you make AI with biology, like using chemical reactions rather than silicon chips, which are very different. They are not flesh and blood. But our brain uses just 15% of up to 15% of the of the power that the human body provides, and that's what limited it. It can't grow bigger because that's the maximum power the body can give it, the metabolic power. So it's possible that they have a different nutrition, a different digestion system, so that their brains are bigger. And if their brains are bigger, we just wouldn't understand them. It's just like we are the dumb kid in the class.
They might not even be humanoid.
No, exactly. They might be something completely crazy. So I'm saying let's not imagine anything before the blind date. Let's just keep our eyes open and then deal with